Imagine walking away from someone who thrived on controlling your emotions, only to discover that your absence is more powerful than any argument, any confrontation, or any display of anger. The person who once dominated your world doesn't miss you. They panic at losing access, they spiral, they calculate, and they react in ways you might never have anticipated. What looks like indifference, absence, or even calm is actually a psychological storm they cannot control. The silence you create becomes the most devastating force in their life, exposing their fragile ego, their obsession with relevance, and the truth they cannot admit. You no longer belong to their system. Because the moment you cut contact and stay gone, something in their mind snaps. Not emotionally in the sense of heartbreak, not psychologically in a reflective or adaptive way. You've removed their mirror, the one they rely on to define themselves, to justify their actions, to feel significant. Narcissists don't operate like healthy individuals who can process absence or loss with introspection or acceptance. Instead, they react, they spiral, they calculate, always seeking the leverage they once had. Your departure isn't just noticed, it is a seismic disruption in their system. This is why the effects of no contact are immediate, disorienting, and often terrifying for them. If this is resonating with you, pause for a second and subscribe, because understanding this psychology is not just theory, it's survival. Awareness of their patterns is what allows you to stay free rather than reactive, and to recognize manipulation before it begins again. When long-term no contact starts, the narcissist doesn't experience it like ordinary people would. There's no healthy grief, no reflection, no authentic heartbreak that prompts personal growth. What gets triggered instead is something far more destabilizing and corrosive: their absolute loss of control, the one thing that keeps their ego intact and their carefully curated world in motion. Control is the core currency of a narcissist's psychology. Everything, attention, reactions, emotional access, even conflict, serves as supply that validates their relevance and dominance. When you remove yourself completely, you don't merely leave the relationship, you collapse the system that kept them regulated. Your absence creates a sudden power vacuum that their mind cannot comprehend. They cannot read you, provoke you, correct the narrative, or extract reassurance from your reactions. That silence isn't neutral. It's a problem with no solution, a void where their influence once existed. And for someone whose identity relies entirely on controlling external perception, the void is intolerable. In the early stages, their mind searches frantically for familiar levers. They replay past interactions, not to process feelings, not to seek understanding, but to locate points of influence, to reconstruct access. No contact feels jarring because it removes the very tools they depend on. Every attempt to provoke a response fails. The buttons they pressed for emotional feedback now produce nothing, and their brain, wired around constant validation, begins to malfunction. Anxiety spikes as they realize the patterns that once guaranteed compliance and attention are gone, replaced by an unsolvable silence that their ego cannot process. That anxiety quickly converts into irritation, then into rage, because rage offers an illusion of control where helplessness cannot. Anger becomes their coping mechanism, their way to reclaim a sense of power, to make the world feel malleable again. Every calculation, every attempt to manipulate, every distorted narrative becomes sharper, more desperate, because nothing else works. And this is why no contact is profoundly effective, not because it punishes them, but because it dismantles their system entirely. The absence of your presence forces them into a psychological space they cannot navigate, exposing vulnerability that they will never admit, and ensuring that the power you reclaim is undeniable. What may look like missing you from the outside is rarely about longing or genuine emotional attachment. For a narcissist, it is frustration at losing access, the sudden inability to exert influence or provoke reactions. They don't miss your presence, they miss your availability. They miss knowing they can still manipulate, charm, or unsettle you. This is why they often test boundaries with indirect actions, watching from afar, asking mutual acquaintances about you, or sending symbolic messages meant to provoke curiosity or guilt. Each gesture is a probe, a desperate attempt to reclaim leverage. The longer you remain absent, the clearer the truth becomes. They no longer hold authority over your emotional world, and that realization is profoundly threatening to their fragile identity. Your silence does not communicate anger, bitterness, or resentment. It communicates independence. And independence is the one thing a narcissist cannot tolerate because it proves they are no longer central, no longer necessary, and no longer in command. Silence feels like rejection to someone whose sense of self is almost entirely built on external feedback. Unlike healthy individuals with a stable internal identity, they regulate their worth through attention, reactions, and emotional engagement from others. When that stream abruptly shuts off, the narcissist experiences it not as calm or neutrality, but as abandonment, humiliation, and erasure all at once. Even negative attention is preferable because it confirms their relevance. Silence offers nothing, leaving them unmoored and disoriented. The discomfort intensifies because narcissists are highly attuned to social hierarchy. They scan constantly for dominance, submission, and relevance in every interaction. When you stop reacting, defending, or explaining, the power dynamic flips. They are no longer imposing distance, they are experiencing it. This loss of perceived status feels like rejection, and the sting of being irrelevant triggers internal chaos. Arguments, confrontations, and emotional manipulation all allow them to feel engaged, influential, or superior. Silence removes the battlefield entirely, leaving no role to play, no audience to manipulate, and no terrain to dominate. Internally, this absence produces shame, but shame is intolerable, so it is converted into anger, contempt, or fantasies of revenge to protect their fragile ego. They may rationalize your absence with mental narratives like, you are immature, cruel, or weak for disappearing, but these stories serve only to shield their ego. Beneath these defenses lies a deeper truth they cannot admit. Your silence proves they no longer control access to you. Rejection is not about losing love, it is about losing relevance. The absence of feedback is undeniable proof that their presence is no longer required. And for someone whose entire self-image relies on dominance, this realization is devastating. Every thought, every emotion becomes a calculation, an effort to regain the lost foothold, and yet, the power they once held is gone. After extended no contact, a predictable internal cycle unfolds, though it may appear chaotic externally. Initially, confusion sets in. Silence disrupts their expectations, and the predictability they rely on is shattered. Even if prior reactions were angry, defensive, or manipulative, there is a pattern. They expected a response. When none comes, uncertainty seeps in, gnawing at their need for control. Confusion often quickly hardens into rage, though not always explosive. Sometimes it is quiet, cold, and internal, fueled by the recognition that the narrative is no longer theirs to control. The rage exists because silence forces them to confront helplessness, and helplessness is intolerable for a narcissistic ego. Anger feels more powerful than vulnerability, so a narcissist's mind automatically defaults to it. Vulnerability is a weakness they cannot tolerate, an opening that exposes the fragile structure of their ego. Once rage stabilizes, the emotional torrent transforms into calculation. This is when the narcissist shifts from raw reaction to strategic planning. Their mind begins running scenarios, exploring every possible avenue to regain influence or control. The focus is never on repairing the relationship or reflecting on mistakes. It is purely about leverage. Charm, guilt, intimidation, triangulation, or playing the victim are all tools to provoke a response. Every action is measured against one question: Will this elicit a reaction? During this strategic phase, they may appear calm, composed, even indifferent to the outside world. But internally, their mind is a constant engine of simulation. Should they reach out directly, feigning concern or innocence? Should they wait silently, hoping to provoke curiosity or guilt? Should they manipulate perceptions through lies or social triangulation to protect their image? Each decision is calculated for its ability to restore control or preserve superiority. If none of these tactics succeed, frustration and simmering rage deepen. Any withdrawal at this point is rarely a sign of closure. It is a tactical retreat, a regrouping to plan the next move, because the cycle of seeking dominance rarely stops unless starved completely of feedback. Long-term no contact disrupts this cycle not by confrontation, but by complete absence. Without emotional responses, their confusion has nowhere to settle, rage has no target, and calculation becomes pointless. The narcissist is left confronting the one thing they are designed to avoid: ego injury. Unlike ordinary people whose self-esteem is built internally and can withstand setbacks, a narcissist's ego is a delicate psychological construct meant solely to shield them from shame. Everything, manipulation, charm, control, performance, is a defense mechanism to prevent one unbearable realization: insignificance. Silence cracks that defense, sending a clear, unarguable message: you no longer define their emotional world. To a narcissist, this silence feels like a direct attack on identity itself. Their self-image relies on being central, influential, and unforgettable. When you remove yourself, that carefully constructed sense of authority collapses. They are no longer the one who determines connection, influence, or engagement. This loss of dominance is experienced as ego injury, a complex mix of humiliation, helplessness, and internal chaos. Even if no new person has replaced you, the narcissist obsesses over perception. Are you happier? Do others see through them? Have you moved on? Each unanswered question amplifies internal discomfort, because their value system depends entirely on external validation rather than internal stability, leaving them exposed, anxious, and disoriented. Without your attention, their internal balance destabilizes. The structure that once held their self-image together begins to crack, and this injury often produces extreme reactions. Some narcissists lash out aggressively, attempting to reassert superiority through insults, threats, or smear campaigns designed to damage your reputation. Others retreat into cold contempt, convincing themselves you were unworthy, inferior, or easily replaceable. This is not indifference. It is psychological self-defense. They must mentally downgrade you to survive the blow to their ego. If they can convince themselves you never mattered, then the loss of control feels less catastrophic, even though the wound beneath it remains open and unresolved. What makes ego injury so dangerous for a narcissist is that it cannot be repaired internally. Healthy people process rejection through reflection, accountability, and growth. Narcissists cannot do this because acknowledging fault would shatter the false self they depend on. So instead of healing, they externalize blame. You become cruel. You become heartless. You become the villain in their story. This distortion allows them to protect their image while avoiding accountability. Long no contact keeps this injury exposed. Each silent day reinforces a truth they cannot escape. You chose peace over them, and that choice proves they are not as powerful, necessary, or irreplaceable as they believed. After extended no contact, many narcissists shift into a phase of distant monitoring before taking any direct action. This stage is quiet, subtle, and often misunderstood. On the surface, it may look like they have moved on. In reality, they are watching, not out of care or nostalgia, but out of surveillance. Monitoring allows them to gather information without risking rejection or further ego injury. It gives them the illusion of control without exposure. During this phase, they often feel safer observing than acting. because observation keeps hope alive without forcing them to confront the possibility of permanent loss. During this monitoring phase, they may check your social media obsessively, ask indirect questions through mutual connections, or track changes in your life through third parties. They are scanning for emotional data. Are you struggling or thriving? Are you quieter or more confident? Do you mention them or act unaffected? Every detail is analyzed as evidence of whether they still matter. This observation helps regulate their anxiety while they decide their next move. What's critical to understand is that they are not seeking closure. They are searching for leverage, for proof that emotional access still exists somewhere beneath the silence. If they sense vulnerability, sadness, or lingering attachment, it reassures them that influence remains. If they observe growth, peace, or indifference, it deeply unsettles them. Indifference is especially threatening because it suggests permanent loss of control. When no emotional signal is detected, they are forced to confront the possibility that they are no longer relevant in your world. This is why they often delay reaching out. Acting too soon risks confirming rejection. Waiting allows them to construct internal narratives that preserve superiority, such as believing you are pretending to be fine or that you will eventually break. Monitoring also serves another critical function: protecting their image. By remaining silent, they can later claim they were the one who disengaged, that they were unbothered, or that they chose distance for their own reasons. This narrative matters deeply to them, especially in social environments where reputation equals power. If they eventually act, it is rarely emotional, it is calculated. The move is chosen based on what they believe will produce the strongest reaction with the least risk. Long no contact disrupts this phase by offering no data, no emotional trail, no confirmation to feed their assumptions. When there is nothing to observe, their monitoring becomes pointless. Without feedback, control slips further away, leaving them frustrated, uncertain, and exposed. As time passes and no contact remains unbroken, hoovering attempts do not disappear. They evolve. Early attempts are often impulsive and obvious, driven by panic or irritation. But after long no contact, narcissists become more strategic. They learn that direct approaches may fail, so they adjust tactics to bypass your defenses without triggering immediate rejection. This is where their behavior can feel subtle, confusing, and deceptively harmless. Strategic hoovering is designed to appear low risk. Instead of emotional declarations, they may send neutral messages, practical questions, or create accidental encounters. They might reference shared history casually, express vague concern, or reach out under the guise of necessity. The goal is not reconciliation. The goal is engagement. Any response, even a cold one, confirms that access still exists. Once engagement is reestablished, control can slowly be rebuilt. This is why even brief replies or explanations can reset the cycle, despite months of progress. Another common shift is indirect hoovering through third parties. Mutual connections may mention them unexpectedly, or you may hear that they are struggling, changing, or doing exceptionally well. These narratives are rarely accidental. They are planted to provoke curiosity, guilt, or comparison. The narcissist hopes the message reaches you emotionally, even if it never reaches you directly. This allows them to test influence without exposure. Long no contact remains powerful because it refuses participation in this system entirely. No response, no curiosity, no reaction leaves nothing for them to work with, and that absence is what finally breaks the cycle. Hoovering attempts are meticulously designed to trigger emotional responses: empathy, guilt, jealousy, or self-doubt. These are not casual gestures, but calculated moves to reopen psychological doors without direct contact. Narcissists understand that emotional hooks are more powerful than arguments. Timing becomes deliberate. They may wait for moments when you are most likely to feel vulnerable: anniversaries, holidays, birthdays, or even times of visible stress or success. Success, surprisingly, can be just as triggering as hardship because it threatens their fragile ego. By reaching out during these moments, they gauge whether they still carry weight in your life. Each attempt is a probe, a test of relevance, a psychological experiment designed to reestablish leverage. What makes long-term hoovering particularly insidious is its ability to mimic maturity. They may appear calm, measured, respectful, or even self-aware. Outwardly, it can seem like personal growth has occurred, but this is not transformation. It is adaptation. Narcissists study patterns and results like strategists, learning from failed attempts to refine future tactics. If chaos no longer produces the desired effect, they try composure. If charm has failed, neutrality is the next approach. Despite appearances, the core motive never changes. Regain relevance and influence. Every subtle move, every indirect gesture is calibrated for one purpose: to see if access can be restored and control reestablished. When these refined strategies fail, frustration escalates. Each unanswered message, ignored attempt, or overlooked gesture reinforces the truth that no contact has been communicating all along. Access is permanently revoked. Their calculations, strategies, and emotional manipulations lose all efficacy. At this point, hoovering either escalates into overt hostility or collapses entirely into withdrawal. Long-term no contact is effective not because it transforms them, but because it eliminates the incentive to continue. Without the reactions they crave, even the most calculated attempts lose momentum, and the system they relied upon to regulate power and ego begins to crumble. When narcissists can no longer regain control through long-term no contact, they rarely sit with the reality of rejection. Their minds cannot tolerate a narrative in which they were powerless, overlooked, or responsible for the relationship's collapse. Instead, they rewrite the story. This is not casual lying or deception, it is psychological survival. To preserve their fragile self-image, reality is edited until it no longer threatens them. Rejection, failure, or impotence cannot exist in their narrative. Instead, the blame is displaced, the situation reframed, and their ego insulated from harm. In this way, the narcissist protects themselves from the one thing they fear most: irrelevance. The danger of hoovering lies not in direct contact, but in its subtle manipulation of perception and emotion. Each neutral message, indirect query, or casual gesture is designed to provoke curiosity or insecurity, not reconciliation. They monitor responses obsessively, calibrating the next step based on even the smallest reaction. Yet, when no contact is maintained consistently, these strategies fail repeatedly. The absence of feedback is the most powerful deterrent. Silence becomes their kryptonite. Without validation, without the emotional fuel they rely upon, their plans collapse. Over time, the narcissist's attention turns elsewhere, but the lesson remains permanent. Control cannot be regained, influence is lost, and independence is unassailable. When you fully step away from a narcissist and maintain no contact, the effect on them goes far deeper than most people realize. They are not missing you in any genuine emotional sense. They are experiencing the destabilization of a system they rely on for their sense of self. Every interaction with you was a feedback loop, a mirror that reflected back their importance, control, and influence. When you remove yourself entirely, that mirror vanishes, leaving them unmoored. They cannot process absence the way healthy people can. They do not grieve, reflect, or learn, they react. Their mind immediately begins scanning for ways to regain leverage, and in the absence of access, confusion, anxiety, and rage intensify. The internal chaos that follows is a psychological storm. Because their ego depends almost entirely on external validation, your silence becomes intolerable. They are forced to confront helplessness, a state they cannot tolerate. Anger becomes their default mechanism because it feels stronger and safer than vulnerability. While outwardly they may seem calm, indifferent, or even composed, internally they are running endless calculations, considering every possible way to provoke a reaction, to regain relevance, or to assert superiority. Even gestures that seem subtle, neutral, or casual, checking social media, asking mutual connections about you, or referencing shared history, are part of this strategy. Every action is aimed at reclaiming influence, and each lack of response from you chips away at their control. Over time, repeated no contact exposes a truth they cannot integrate. You are independent, and your emotional world no longer requires their presence. This realization is terrifying to them because their identity is built on dominance and relevance. Unlike healthy individuals, they cannot process rejection or loss internally. They cannot reflect, adapt, and grow without threatening the carefully constructed false self they rely upon to survive. Instead, they externalize blame, rewrite narratives, and diminish you in their mind to preserve their ego. This protective mechanism keeps them from sitting with shame, humiliation, or feelings of inadequacy, but it also leaves them trapped in cycles of confusion, rage, and strategic calculation. Hoovering attempts are an extension of this process. Even when they appear calm, strategic, or self-aware, the goal remains the same: regain access and influence. They watch, they wait, they probe, and they test timing to exploit moments of vulnerability. Success, happiness, or visible growth on your part is as threatening as hardship because it demonstrates that you no longer rely on them and that control cannot be reestablished. Every indirect gesture or subtle attempt at engagement is measured for its ability to provoke a response without risking exposure to rejection. If the tactic fails, frustration deepens, but the narcissist rarely abandons the idea of influence entirely. They may retreat temporarily, regrouping to try again later, until the reality of your independence finally registers as permanent and undeniable. Long-term no contact does not change the narcissist. It simply removes the opportunity for them to operate. Without feedback, calculation loses purpose, rage has no target, and control cannot be reclaimed. The silence itself becomes a powerful mirror, reflecting the reality they cannot manipulate. Over time, the patterns of monitoring, probing, and hoovering collapse because the source of their influence, the reactions, attention, and access they crave, is gone. Your absence is not merely physical, it is psychological. It dismantles the architecture of their self-perception and leaves them exposed to the one experience they cannot endure: irrelevance. By maintaining silence and independence, you do not confront them directly. You allow the system they depend on to unravel naturally. And in that unraveling, the power dynamic is permanently shifted. The beauty of this approach lies in its subtlety. There is no confrontation, no argument, no emotional warfare. Every gesture you previously made, every interaction they relied upon, disappears. Their attempts to regain influence become increasingly transparent and ineffective, revealing their dependency on external validation. While they may continue to watch or manipulate through third parties, the absence of direct engagement ensures they can no longer dictate your emotional state. Silence communicates independence more powerfully than any argument or explanation could. It demonstrates that their relevance is not guaranteed. Their control is no longer absolute, and your life continues unaffected. Over time, the narcissist learns, whether consciously or unconsciously, that their power over you is gone, and that realization leaves a deeper wound than any confrontation or insult ever could. In essence, no contact is not just a tool for self-preservation. It is a mirror that forces the narcissist to face a truth they cannot tolerate. It exposes the fragility of their ego, the illusory nature of their dominance, and the limits of their influence. It does not change who they are, and it does not heal them, but it ensures that you are no longer part of the system they depend upon. By staying silent, you break the cycle of manipulation and reclaim your emotional autonomy. Every day of consistent absence strengthens your independence and reinforces the lesson that your attention, engagement, and energy are no longer commodities to be controlled. In this way, long-term no contact becomes not merely an act of withdrawal, but a profound shift in the balance of psychological power. When you step away and maintain long-term no contact with a narcissist, the effects ripple far beyond what is immediately visible. What begins as silence and absence gradually transforms into a dismantling of the system they relied upon to define themselves, control your reactions, and maintain relevance. They do not process this loss as grief or reflection, because their identity is not built on internal stability. Instead, they face confusion, rage, and calculation, all fueled by the sudden inability to manipulate and influence. Your absence is not neutral. It is a mirror reflecting their irrelevance, their lack of control, and the fragility of the ego they have meticulously constructed.